Welcome to the session of our web series, Fireside Chat with Champions, in which we interview global business leaders, asking them crowdsourced questions relevant to the biggest challenge we face today, COVID-19 and its impact on various aspects of business and the way we can steer ourselves in current uncertainties. Today, we have a very special guest with us, Luisa Ribeiro. She's CEO of Gema Ventures, a pioneer startup accelerator in Latin America. Gema Ventures is a B2B focused startup accelerator based in Sao Paulo. Today, Luisa is the only female leader and accelerator that has been selected by Startup Brazil, the state-sponsored accelerator program. She also served as CEO of Recode, pioneer organization in the cause of digital inclusion, with 800 centers in its network across 8 countries, having impacted 1.7 million lives. Previously, Luisa worked at Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris, creating innovation policies for Latin America. She also served as a consultant in Accenture Brazil and worked at Cantillon Capital Management, a hedge fund in London. Luisa holds a BA degree in engineering from PUCERIO and MBA from INSEAD. She also did leadership programs in Harvard and Oxford University. She was named Young Global Leader by World Economic Forum and Rising Talent by Women's Forum for Economy and Society. Thanks, Luisa, for accepting our invitation. I would request you to let our viewers know a little bit more about you and your current activities. Floor is yours, Luisa.
I left the organization that I was serving as CEO, Recode. It's been the last 2 years of beautiful work working with youth, vulnerable youth here in Brazil, especially. The organization serves 8 countries, but here in Brazil specifically, in all the Brazilian states, and working to develop these tech skills in vulnerable youth whenever we act. So it's a very interesting job just to have this other perspective, right? As you mentioned, I have been working with startups and for the last 10 years in my accelerators and also in venture capital, and working a lot with entrepreneurs and leaders that were coming from, in a way, a privileged background, that had some connections, that had opportunities to study in good schools. And this is what we see normally when we talk about the unicorns in Latin America. There's this specific profile of the entrepreneurs that are well off or privileged. So it's interesting also to do this work and to be able to give the necessary skills or pointers or plant seeds in those that are not privileged and that can also make a living in the tech space, because it's something that you can learn and we prove that in a few months with really a good dedication and interest. You can learn to program, and you can and of course there are millions of jobs opportunities in that field as an entrepreneur, but also working for the largest companies around. So yeah, it's been an interesting opportunity. I'm back serving as a consultant for my organization, working with companies, large organizations that want to innovate, want to invest in startups or be digitally transformed. And I've recently started a new project during quarantine. It was something that was close to my heart and that I wanted since end of last year to be involved in. That is, I'm generating now content, producing a TV series, a documentary, and a podcast in more of the spirituality and wellness topics. So it's something a bit different from what I've been doing. But yeah, I'm very excited about it, and all of this experience and what a lot of people are facing in this time that has a lot to do with mental health. I think it's also a nice opportunity to reflect and to consume this type of content.
No, that's awesome, Luisa. Actually, in fact, like, we have a lot of similarities because during COVID times, I was also thinking, like, you are restricted in doing. I am into agriculture technology, so we have no option but to be on field, right? And we have global projects, and those projects were not working out because of, like, my team cannot travel or I cannot travel and all that. So I started thinking about what best to be done. And I used to get a lot of calls from a lot of startup I support. I mentor a lot of startups. And there were questions I was not able to answer. So I thought, like, to talk to intelligent people like you and put it on record on a video and see to it, like, maybe a few hundreds of them also see it. It would be value addition for that. And while doing that, like, a lot of people, they started telling me, like, Deepak, why don't you start working on the mental health part of it? And so, like, we are thinking about coming out with something which is called actually Business Monk, right? So that would be about, like, how to de-stress yourself in difficult time, because the one quality I'm having is that actually I never get into stress, believe me, right? I've seen all ups and downs, created large companies, worked for large companies, created, this is my third startup. One was a big success, other was, like, just failed and wiped out everything which I was having. So, but still, like, I was not in stress. So, like, I believe we need people like you who start thinking about, like, on a personal mental health and how to ensure that, like, there is a content which is coming from people who practice it. So that's awesome. I think this project is called V, right?
It's Y. It's WAII, and it's Hawaiian, and it's for sacred water. So it has that element of water, and what we're doing is we're having a look at. Oh, sorry, let me take off the. And what we're doing is that we're exactly looking at it, not to a specific religious or specific practice or ritual, but actually looking at a lot of things and seeing the similarities, right? So talking to, for instance, we're talking about the state of flow, so we're going to talk to yoga professors and meditators, but also surfers and climbers and musicians, and having the scientific also side of it. So talking to neurologists, for instance. So having this more a broad overview of specific for specific topics. So it's something that we can collaborate for in the future.
No, would love to. In case you have a topic, how to cope with failures, you are having the guy who have failed far too many times than actually generally people would, and still be motivated.
Those are the best. Those are the best learnings that we can have.
Yeah, I always believe anything which doesn't kill you make you stronger. So, like, there is no harm in failing, right? But you have to bounce back.
I had when we were doing in Gema, the accelerator, the Gema sessions, I was playing with Gem sessions. We had the Gema sessions, and there was the most successful one was the fuck up sessions, where we're actually the entrepreneurs were talking about their fuck ups, and that's how we learn, from each other's mistakes as well. So
I fully agree. So that brings us to our first question. Luisa, you have seen that COVID is not easy for any type of organization, but for startup it is more difficult. So I would like to understand from you, because of your understanding of Latin American and Brazilian startup is pretty awesome, that actually what is the current situation, how the COVID has impacted the startup ecosystem in general and the startups particularly.
Yeah, it is very complicated because I think they're the most fragile because they have probably all the uncertainties and they're building something new, and also the cash is limited. So that's a big point there. So some have, just secured, 12 months or 18 months funding. And now with all these uncertainties and lack of revenue, a lot of things have changed. So so this on the downside, but at the same time, the entrepreneurs, I think they're the most resilient, and they have these characteristics that are also very important in crisis, and have probably some at least been through a lot of crisis and a lot of downs in their careers. So I think that they are the ones that are better prepared to recover and to adapt. So to create something new and to, turn the game around shortly. But of course, there's many things that, probably a lot of them are facing that are having to do layoffs. We see a lot of layoffs in startups, and of course, cutting costs, and even the founders, setting by examples. The executives are cutting their pays by a lot, by 50%, as what we see, and some are laying off good people, unfortunately, because of the need to improve the cost efficiency and to make the cash last longer. So I think this is the main concern, to survive, in these times. How can you survive? Let's make the equations that your cash lasts for at least another year, because probably it's the turnaround is going to be after that period. And yeah, do the maximum that you can with the least amount of money. Be creative, and most of the entrepreneurs, they have that as well on their skill. Be creative. How do you do more with less, and this type of thinking. At the same time, I think that there are, of course, with every crisis, a lot of opportunities as well. A lot of changes are happening here, and I guess in the rest of the world. We see, for health, for instance, a lot of startups that were dedicated in digital health are doing very well. The ones that were already solid, we've seen a huge growth. We had also a regulation that was approved here in Brazil, which was the telemedicine, that recently, because of COVID, the legislation was approved. So now it's possible to work with telemedicine here, which is good news for those that were already preparing for that news and suddenly saw the number of contracts and patients and hospitals and clients skyrocket. We're probably a lot of things, as we were mentioning, regarding well-being online, technologies for dedicated to either to health or of the body or health of the mind. I had worked with a few startups on that field that are doing very well right now. Of course, everything that improves the quality of conversations and interaction online, and in education. I think for education, there's a lot of space still. People are still testing, but the experience of online class, especially for kids, is something that is not trivial. But I think that there's a good space there to improve. I think basically the world was forced to be online, right? And for those that were already online, okay, didn't change much. There were a lot of people that were working remotely and used to platforms such as Zoom, but there's a huge part of the population that was not, and that was forced to do it and has seen that it works with all the constraints and so on. But it does work, basically. So you have this whole new mass of people now becoming familiar with technologies. My mom is doing her philosophy classes now online and our discussions, and my mom is terrible with technology. And now she's like, oh, I raised my hand here in Zoom. I learned to raise my hand. So it's fantastic, because it's certainly something that will continue afterwards. And just because people were forced to adapt to this new reality. So I guess there are a lot of new services and content that we can drive to this mass of people that weren't heavy, consumers of online products and services. Logistics, a lot of course, online shopping. So all this new form of delivery and logistics that's been also affected in a good way. And then a few other sectors that will have to reinvent themselves, more related to entertainment perhaps, and the typical, network entertainment that we used to have. We're invaded by many lives on Instagram, and with a lot of people creating interesting content without the intermediary. And the big networks weren't able to shoot their sitcoms and the Bollywood movies, and everything was put on hold here. We have a very huge sitcom culture here in Brazil as well. And then what do we do? Everybody was questioning what would be next. The same with leisure and travel, right? So, of course, there are some industries that have a huge hit, and others that I think that might even change for good how we will consume that type of service, such as business trips or business events, right? We will still, of course, travel to experience a different culture, and to for leisure, and just to be in other parts of the world. But perhaps we will rethink some of the business trips that we used to have, or just meetings to sign contracts, or to have that dinner with a prospect or with a client. Maybe that will be more and more done online. So I'll stop here, because otherwise I'll continue.
No, I fully agree with you. Like, the way we used to travel for conferences, right, just to network with people, or just like, meeting a prospect. So like, you need to be high flyer to be recognized, right? So suddenly you'll find that people will try to be more efficient in their traveling. I won't say they'll stop traveling, but they would be more efficient in their traveling. At the same time, if you see that the COVID, what it has done is that actually it has become the biggest motivator for any organization to go digital, right? So it's not CEOs, CIOs, it is COVID, which has actually made the traditional industry also becoming virtual. Now, from the same point, I would like to understand, like, that Brazil and Latin America has been more or less commodity-driven markets, right? So a lot of economy depends on agriculture, or like, other commodities, typically mining and all that. Suddenly, a lot of value chain got broken because of COVID. How do you see in these scenarios, like, whether the Brazil or Latin America will go back after COVID to those type of industry, or there is a internal introspection within the country that can we pick up businesses which ensure that actually, like, we are resilient to pandemic like COVID?
Yeah, I think it's the big question, right? What will happen now in these sort of business? And what I see is also, there's a more caution towards whom are you buying from, who are your suppliers, because suddenly I cannot certain things I cannot buy from China anymore, or from India anymore. There's the complicated things happening in trade, and also people are feeling, I think, more local than ever, and even consuming more locally, being it from the from your neighborhood restaurant, or the grocery nearby, because I think people are more empathic also to those businesses that and the people that they know, and the people around them that need to be alive. I see down my street 2 or 3 of the restaurants that I used to go are closed now. Of course, I don't want this to happen. I want my neighborhood to be lively and up and running, and I want to greet the owner that I know for a few years. So I think that even in the small respect of small businesses, this is true. Like we're thinking more of consuming locally from people around us, but also for the large organizations as well. I think I know a few big companies that were, used to source from, Asian countries, that like European companies that were sourcing from Asian countries that were forced also to like find solutions nationally because of COVID. So I think that there might be something happening there too, but I think probably over time that will go back to normal, let's say.
No, I also believe that otherwise what we'll be doing is that we might be end up creating local level monopolies, because when you are having globalized economy, it is easier for small startups and SMEs to compete because they are having some niche which have a global perspective. But suddenly, if you want that everything need to be created locally, then you need capital, and those capital come from the large companies. So they end up becoming monopoly with 10%, 15% of the GDP of the nation within just controlled by one company. So again, I'm saying that going forward, we'll evolve. We'll see what's happening globally as well as in various economies. That brings me to another question on a similar lines. How do you see investment happening? Do you see that actually, like, the companies or the investors are still open because you have worked for the hedge funds, you have made innovation policies for OECD, and what is your perspective on that? Whether you see the venture capital companies, the angel investors, are they investing, seeing the opportunities, or they're scared that COVID will kill a lot of startups? So let's keep our cash in our pockets.
I think that yes, there's still investment for good, strong startups that are focusing on specific topics or trending industries. But I think that there's a natural cautious now happening. And it probably will last a few months just to see where there's a lot of uncertainty, right? So I think that for the last probably 3 months, investors and even companies that are also investing in startups, they are just waiting a little bit to see what happens. The interest is there, the money is there, but let's just, have a little bit of a sense of what's going to happen in the next few months before deploying some of the money. Of course, that there are exceptions, and there are sectors that are doing tremendously well, and there's still investment for that. But I've seen a couple of investors holding back a little bit, and just it's unprecedented, right? It's we haven't faced anything like that, so I think it's natural to have this cost. But I believe that very soon, as soon as we have a breath of fresh air, being it with vaccines or with whatever comes next, and with the slow recovery of countries that were hit before us. Here in Latin America, we were not the first to have COVID, but we're looking a lot to the countries that have the population has recovered and are now we're now in that expectation. Will it come back? Will it not? So I think we'll see that in probably the last 2 to 4 months will be crucial to see where it's going, and then just hopefully calm the nerves down and recover the investments.
No, I also believe, because just see the irony, the country from where it all started, that would be the only country in this world which would be having positive GDP, right? So except China, everybody is in negative 4%, 8%, 12%, right? And China is having plus 1% GDP growth. So that's the irony.
There's conspiracy theories around that,
Right. Not going into the politics of it, because that's itself needs a long discussion. I would also like to understand your perspective. Do you think that investor will start focusing on social impact as well, rather than just making 10x and 20x going forward? Or you believe that it's just currently everybody is emotional about it, so they talk about social impact, and once you'll have things becoming normal, the VCs will become as bad they were in the past, trying to have bigger pie, rather than having a social impact?
I hope so. I do so, and I hope so. I mean, we've been seeing a trend, like even before COVID, of social investments, impact investment, and even social bonds by traditional, even Swiss banks, and here in the region as well. So yeah, I think it's a subject that is growing, and it's just in the early, part of the hills. So I think that there's still room for a lot of growth in that sector, and I do believe that it makes sense to where we are right now for people to become more and more interested in these type of investments. We see brands now, and even like fashion magazines and big brands repositioning themselves to be more perceived as more sustainable, as more social impact conscious. We've been seeing a lot happening here and other parts of the world regarding racism and gender issues, and so many issues that have been recently been voiced and been talked about and discussed, and so important issues, as well as political issues. We've been seeing leaders of specific countries and how they were able to lead in times of COVID and what happened to these countries. So it's very now clear what the consequences of specific leadership. So I do think that people are seeing this as more and more important, not only as the small charity that is working with it, but as a civil movement. I've been involved since the beginning. Here in Brazil, there's an initiative called União, and then União Rio for Rio de Janeiro, and São Paulo, and for specific states, where actually business leaders, politicians, and society in general, they are together and acting just to raise funds to distribute to the communities, to the slums, to the low-income communities, to help also fund hospitals and equipment and all the infrastructure need. And so much has been raised, and so many people involved. Oh, I'm good with I own company in logistics, I can help with that. Oh, my NGO already has all this process in place, and we can receive the money and collect. And the other one, oh, we're happy to distribute and to coordinate with local organizations to distribute the food and the cleaning material that's been collected. So it's very beautiful to see, and it was so impressive what in 2 weeks this whole network that was put together, and the amount of money that was raised. So all this sense of community, it's us, right? And it's a part, as you mentioned, everything is part of a chain. And if some part of the chain is not functioning, it will affect everybody, right? So we are all responsible for that. We cannot count on governments because, I mean, it takes at least too long, right? To organize the process and to be able to approve all the. So yes, we need to pressure and we need the government together, but while they're figuring out how, let's start doing, and let's not wait for it in our houses. So I've seen a lot happening here in Brazil, and I'm sure in other countries it was true as well. And yes, I think the sense of community and the sense of the social, because hopefully it won't stop, and all the network that was organized and the people that are together in this specific network to fight COVID and the effects of COVID in our country to our people, it will continue. But to other issues, I mean, it's we both know what inequality looks like in both our countries. So there is, lots of room to act together and to do something about it. And I think people are more aware of that, not only in this aspect, but also around nature. It's been super clear what happened. We had the other day, every day there's like a video going viral where everybody's distributing, there lion, what you call a sea lion appeared on the beach. Oh, there's a whale in another place. Oh, look at all these turtles and these new animals. Like, it's so obvious what happened, and it's kind of poking us. We're not alone here. Look at all these species and look at everything that we have, and the water is clear, and so many things happened with just a few months of us slowing down, and it was kind of in our face, like there's nature around you, and if you take a little bit of care of the environment that you're in, look at all those beautiful things that can happen. So I think that it has been important to show us these dynamics and how we can be part of it and contribute for the humans in this planet, and also for nature.
It's very refreshing to hear from you about the environment and the beautiful thought about the community. And in fact, coming from ex-hedge fund manager, right? That's very, very reassuring that we still have a lot of positivity around us. So that brings us to a little bit of the individual person you are. On a personal level, how you have faced COVID? Did you do something different than what you used to do to be more motivated? Because someone who has been traveling across the globe and been working with as a mentor, as an accelerator for startup, it's always, the life is always on a fast pace, and suddenly things slow down. And that put a lot of impact personally on health as well as the mental health of the person. So I would like to understand how you keep yourself motivated, and your organization, what you did in your organization to face COVID and remain resilient and positive across the journey.
Yeah, I've been through multiple different phases, like in these last 4 months, from a complete voluntary lockdown and a sense of becoming very unproductive and not blaming myself for that, but just taking things very slow in the beginning and thinking a lot and reflecting a lot and connecting deeply with my spirituality and my moment personally, to at some point very anxious to be inside the same place, the same apartment. And I'm very, I need nature. I need my, swim in the beach. I need to go to, to my trails in the woods and waterfalls. And I'm blessed that I have that on my backyard. But just not being able to do that was very, very complicated for me at some point. And then I allowed myself to do that very early in the morning. I said, okay, why do I need to be here completely locked down if I can go 6 a.m. and not meet anyone and not be a threat to anyone, and just have my dose of mental health with me? So that helps. I'm an introvert, so I think for extroverts it was probably much worse, because I am fine to be by myself. I enjoy my company. Of course, I miss talking to friends and being with people at certain points, but it was an important time for me to be alone as well. And in terms and I did my yoga classes online. They were perfect. That they already opened the studio. I'm like, no thanks, I'm going to continue at home for a few more months. I'm fine with that. But yeah, I did many courses online and kept myself mentally busy. I'm missing traveling and being in a different place and in a different culture, and I still miss it. But also there are a lot of things that I think we're very, very good at staying in the place. As I mentioned, I finally adopted a dog. It has been a very, I wanted that for so long, but because I was always traveling, I said, okay, this is so unfair to have a pet while I'm most of the time out of home. And, said, okay, what's the best time ever to be at home with educating a puppy than now. I'm home all the time. So that was a great thing. And there were many positive aspects. Of course, there are times that I was more anxious, but in generally I've been, and compared to other people that I was talking to, I think I was a lot in peace and just taking it slowly and trusting whatever was going through. It was hard, for instance, in terms of the business, because I was just starting. We had some shootings organized in the Amazon and in Costa Rica, in Uruguay, and suddenly we had to pause everything. And then after a while, I said, you know what? Let's start online, as you were doing. Like there are things that we can do online. It's not everything, not all the experience that we want to show we can do online. There are many things. So let's take advantage of this moment that we're facing. Everybody is going through the same situation. Even the TV presenters and actors, they're doing their shows in this format. So let's start with what we have. And then when we have a different scenario, we will adapt to the different scenario. So that's and at some point, my laziness and productivity, it became like a force and a strength of energy and creative power. That's still going. I'm waking up very early, and that never happened in my entire life. I need my hours of sleep, but I'm waking up early without any alarm clock and just being very focused and creative for the next couple of months. I hope it lasts. This phase lasts for longer.
No, I always believe lazy people are the smartest people, because they don't want to do too many things, so they find the better way of doing it. So being lazy is always a strength. I know a lot of lazy people who are super awesome. They get the things done right faster than others. Just because they're lazy, they'll find the better way of doing it. So that brings us to the last part of our discussion, where actually we look forward from you to the silver bullets of advice to the startups, which would be like, would have just maybe got into the business, or they would have not raised sufficiently. So they are going through this pandemic, and which have restricted their revenues, restricted their opportunity or possibility of raise funds. So what would be 4 or 5 things you would suggest to any entrepreneur so that they can weather out this bad time, and then they would be resilient enough to survive COVID?
Yes, first of all, buckle up your seatbelts and just be very, very conscious on what you're spending your money more than ever. Like startups already have that embedded in their system, but now more than ever, every penny counts. Make sure you have, sufficient cash for the next year to come, and do the hard things, whatever you need to do to keep that cash. You're in survival mode, so it's not time for spending or for spending on trivial things. The second is keep your eyes open and understand what's the contest, and understand the opportunities that are happening, because once things change and the costs change and the economy change, if you're prepared to take advantage of that, you'll have a great differential and start. And as we were mentioning, try to be not lazy, but try to at some points take a different look and try to take a different perspective, and give yourself time to reflect. Sometimes we're in this crazy mode where we're only thinking like one palm ahead of us and just used to the situation and thinking so badly in how to do this little thing well, and we forget to look around and to see what's happening outside our business. So reserve some time for this reflection, even if that means, you know, being a bit idle or being a bit at sometimes, not too much, but sometimes.
So that is, yeah. Anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think that's already some good pointers that I'll try to adapt to include myself in it as well. That's what I've been trying to do.
No, that's awesome advice, and I believe me, like, you know, when you said cash, that's important. Take care of yourself. See the broader vision, and don't be very short-sightedness. Don't be on a treadmill that you have to keep on running. Look for the new opportunities and challenges. So that is awesome advice for sure.
With the airline, still in the airline scenario, buckle up your seatbelt and put your mask first on yourself before trying to help others, because be mentally sane and take care of yourself. Otherwise, your business is going down. So you need to take care of yourself.
And putting mask is now literal, whether in airlines or even out of the aircraft.
Yes,
so yes,
yes.
put that mask. That's very important. So that's another, I'll say that take home for the audience. That please wear your mask. It might save lives. You never know. So Luisa, it was a pleasure talking to you, and I thoroughly enjoyed all insights you provided us. And wish you all the best. Stay safe, and thanks a lot for giving this time.
Thank you, Deepak.
Pleasure talking to you. Take care.
It was a pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.